President Biden is on his way to France this evening, where he will mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day with a speech praising the strength of America's alliances. But a new piece in The Atlantic by McKay Coppins describes pervasive anxiety in Europe over whether the Western world order can actually survive a second Trump term. Fear of losing Europe's most powerful ally has translated into a pathologically intense fixation on the U.S. presidential race. European officials can explain the Electoral College in granular detail and cite polling data from battleground states. Thomas Bagger, the state secretary in the German Foreign Ministry, told me that in a year when billions of people in dozens of countries around the world will get the chance to vote, the only election all Europeans are interested in is the American election. Almost every official I spoke with believed that Donald Trump is going to win. Joining me now is McKay Coppins, staff writer for The Atlantic. McKay, thank you for being here. We're going to just set aside the European assessment of who is going to be the winner for a moment and just talk to me about I think it's almost hard to overstate the hyper-fixation of Europeans on this presidential race. You note you were talking to George Kent, the U.S. ambassador to Estonia, and you have this anecdote where he tried to make small talk about horticulture, but his gardener had other things on his mind. Can we talk about the vote in Congress? The gardener wanted the latest news on the Ukraine aid package. You traveled all over Europe for this piece. Can you talk a little bit about the level of interest and sort of what the catalytic event for that interest was?
Yeah, I was honestly taken aback by the fact that everywhere I went, with almost everyone I talked to at every level, whether it was, a foreign minister or, a 23-year-old grad student and low-level government worker, all of them were paying incredibly close attention to American politics, especially the U.S. presidential race. And I mean, the catalytic event is that they're terrified that Donald Trump is going to get elected again. Time and time again, the word that kept coming up in these interviews was existential, as in the stakes for this race are existential for Europe. And it's no secret why, right? Donald Trump has been very clear that he is not a fan of NATO. He has said both privately and publicly that countries that aren't paying what he considers their fair share deserve to be attacked by Russia. And for especially Eastern European countries, I spent time in Poland and Estonia, that is a really frightening thing to hear from the former and potentially future leader of the most powerful ally to Europe. And that fear of Trump's return is causing all kinds of reconsiderations of the relationship with the United States in ways that I found, frankly, pretty jarring.
Well, I mean, I would also assume Russia invading Ukraine, which is definitely in Europe's backyard, Western Europe's backyard, would strike fear in the hearts of many people in Western Europe. And the prospect of having someone in the Oval Office who is sympathetic to Vladimir Putin's ends or goals is probably terrifying. You mentioned that Germany is planning for the possibility of a Trump second term. Can you talk a little bit more about their sort of thinking and why they seem so positive that this is Trump's race to lose?
Yeah, so the German Foreign Ministry, after Trump won the first election and sometime in the middle of that first term, they kind of realized that they needed to rethink their approach to America. Like a lot of Western governments, they have plans for dealing with developments in places like China or Russia. But because the alliance with the U.S. has always been so close, they never felt like they would have to do that for America. But now they do. And so they're developing contingency plans for the outcome of the 2024 election. They have a plan for if Biden wins, though most of the officials I spoke to in Germany and really across Europe do not think Biden is going to win. They have a plan for Trump winning, and in that plan, it really calls for figuring out which major issue sets are going to be destabilized by Trump's return to power, whether that's tariffs or Ukraine or NATO or climate change, and how they can try to get close to Trump's confidants. They're already kind of mapping out his inner circle and figuring out their way in there. But I have to tell you, the thing that actually most struck me was that they're also planning for a third scenario, which is a sustained period of uncertainty about the outcome of the election, paired with widespread political violence in the United States, something like January 6th, but on a much larger scale. And, you know, it's not that German officials necessarily think that's a very likely outcome, but given the instability in American politics over the past 8 years, their feeling is that it's not so outrageous a scenario that they shouldn't plan for it. And so that they are currently making plans for how to respond to that.
Well, yes, I think those of us who we're old enough to remember 2020, and so planning for something like that doesn't seem out of the ordinary if it is still, you know, a distressing landscape to look out upon. Foreign counterparts, you write. You're speaking about Victoria Nuland, the former Undersecretary of Political Affairs for the State Department. She says, foreign counterparts would say to me straight up, the first Trump election, maybe people didn't understand who he was or it was an accident. A second election of Trump, we'll never trust you again. I understand the sense of betrayal that Europeans are girding themselves for. But in terms of autocrats rising to power and sweeping through Western democracies, I mean, Europe has plenty of its own examples, right? They have Viktor Orban in Hungary. They have Marine Le Pen in France. They have Meloni in Italy. They have Duda in Poland. I mean, do they see Trumpism as an extension of that or as a singularly American phenomenon?
No, I think they see Trump as an extension of the same kind of right-wing nationalism and populism that is giving a lot of Western democracies in Europe problems. But it is different when it happens in America. I mean, there's just no other way to say it, right? The Western European countries, really European democracies in general, have looked to America for decades as a aspirational democracy, right? The city on the hill. I mean, it sounds cheesy in some ways, and it's easy to be cynical about it. But I have to tell you, I was really surprised by how often I encountered this kind of really idealistic sentiment about what role America is supposed to play in the free world, and the sense of kind of heartbroken betrayal at this idea that Trump could come back to power and that Americans would put somebody like Trump in power. It's not that they think that America is uniquely bad. It's just that they actually have been predisposed to think that America is uniquely averse to this kind of, authoritarian politics. And seeing it now kind of tear through American politics is frightening and disorienting for a lot of Europeans.
Well, McKay, it's so deeply researched and so deeply reported. Everyone should check it out. McKay Coppins with The Atlantic. Thank you so much for your time and essential reporting, McKay.
Thanks, Alex.